I'm Mark Keffer, a Cleveland painter, and I'm involved in the Sonata No. 5 project. The movement, the third one, at first struck me the most. I liked the minimal, structured beginning and a kind of less is more mindset that I really responded to, and then it built later in the movement. But the more I listened to them, I really think the first one is amazing. I think that the whole thing is remarkable. I don't know all of the details about the way that the music is made, but emotionally it's the first movement. You know, it was very difficult to interpret that into the visuals in my painting because I didn't want to literally try to represent patterns in the music. I was trying to make my piece independent of that. I could see the sheet music, and there's beautiful abstract patterns in there, and it was very difficult to not emulate those. I was trying to stay independent of a kind of literal representation of those patterns. So I basically just tried to still make my version that echoed that, you know, sort of did its own thing and ran parallel to the music as best I could make it. A lot of my current work has references to electronic circuitry. I didn't know that that made sense in the work, even though I did hear the work through digital file. That seemed like a stretch. So this allowed me to vary it to some extent, and I think I opened it up in ways spatially. I still have some of the internal, like early structures, and that stayed, but they're different. And I think this spatially, I basically left it a little more air, because I know that I have been really jamming up the surface and the space in the current work, and I let this breathe a little more as it seemed appropriate for the connection to the music. So I would turn the lights off, close my eyes, lay down, and just focus on that. I'm more of a single tasker on that. I'll frequently have music on when I'm working, but it's just background. It's sort of an emotional background element. It's not, I'm not thinking about that music, I'm thinking about my work. So I approached it where I listened to the music, the sonata, a couple times very intently, and focused on that before I started to have some kind of game plan. And then when I was working on it, I didn't listen to it. It was more, I work in steps, and so these steps are very kind of, there's some mechanical quality to the way I'm working. I'm not pushing paint around with a brush where I would be responding emotionally and directly. That sort of old action painter mindset is not how I approach it. So, but it's interesting that now I've been making new stuff, and I'm listening to the sonata as I'm doing that, because I'm just having it be an emotional sort of source that I'm connecting to. In that regard, I was also thinking about how the piano can have harsh, kind of real cut and dried sounds, or it can have softer sounds. And so I wanted to incorporate both of those into the overall painting. Yeah, and some of these just naturally sort of evolved. There's like these solid ones, there's the ones that are cut out, and you know, it's do they, you know, you could ask if they fit together or not, and so this is kind of just this kind of exploded activity that happened a lot in the patterns of the notes of the music. The sort of movement of the imagery going off of the picture plane in both directions really, I think was an effort to kind of address the time element within music, because in painting you can take it all in at once, but music necessarily has a time component. So that was a challenge, like how can I imply time in the painting? So these forms appear that they were passing through the picture plane, and then of course going off of the edge. And in my mind it made me think that this was sort of an ongoing thing, that this was just a glimpse of, so that implied that there was a time element going beyond the painting itself. It seems like there were a lot of elements that were a little more mysterious, a little more evocative, which I sort of equate with minor chords, and I was thinking in terms of the secondary colors. And I have a tendency to like work with like orange green, which is a sort of an odd combination, or violet green, and so that seemed to be a connection. But when I'm making the work, I'm building these layers up, and blue ended up in it as almost a reference to twilight or night. And but when I'm building the layers, I always end with a jet black layer, and then I'll be going back into it and sanding it and whatnot. Sometimes I'll remove the black entirely. In this one I left it with the blue and this kind of orange and green stuff that's coming through. And so that's how I connected to it, just an emotional level. I'm not a literal painter. I don't try to. I've been asked before questions about my palette, which is not something that I intellectualize. It's a felt response. And so I wanted there to be a kind of mystery that I get from the music.